Hello and welcome to episode 14 from Irish Skies Pod, coming to you from Duxford Airfield, which is the home of the British Airliner Collection and the Imperial War Museum. Duxford Airfield is a 30-minute car drive north of Stansted Airport, and the aerodrome itself was built during the First World War and was one of the earliest Royal Air Force stations. During 1917, the Royal Flying Corps expanded, and Duxford was one of the many new airfields established to train aircrews. After World War I ended, Duxford was kept open, first as a training school and then from 1924 as a fighter station, a role which it was to carry out with distinction for 37 years. By 1938, the reputation of RAF Duxford's No. 19 Squadron was such that it became the first RAF squadron to re-equip with the new Supermarine Spitfire, and the first Spitfire was flown into Duxford in August 1938. During the Battle of Britain, Duxford and its satellite airfield at nearby Foulmere were located on the border between 11 and 12 groups, and the airfields had two main jobs. Firstly, to protect the Midlands, and then to assist the fighters of the 11 Group when needed. 11 Group was responsible for the southeast of England, including London, and bore the brunt of the fighting of the summer in 1940. Although only one squadron, No. 19, was based at Duxford or Foulmere throughout the Battle of Britain, several other units made up of pilots from across the world operated from Duxford. And in all, 15 men lost their lives flying from Duxford and Foulmere during the Battle of Britain. In the years following the end of the Second World War, Duxford was equipped with jet fighters such as the Gloucester Meteor, Hawker Hunter and Gloucester Javelin, and its pilots stood ready to shoot down Soviet bombers should the Cold War turn hot. However, in the 1950s, Duxford was nearing the end of its operational RAF life, as the original defence needs no longer applied. In July 1961, the last operational flight was made from RAF Duxford, and for about 15 years the future of the airfield remained in the balance. However, the Imperial War Museum had been looking for a suitable site for the storage, restoration and eventual display of exhibits too large for its headquarters in London, and they obtained permission to use Duxford for this purpose. Cambridgeshire County Council joined with the Imperial War Museum and the Duxford Aviation Society, thereby giving the near-abandoned aerodrome a new lease of life. The array of military aircraft on display is very impressive, and whilst wandering through the displays, it's hard to imagine how quickly these aircraft in wartime were designed, built and commissioned in huge numbers. It's also hard to imagine the life and death thoughts of the thousands of young men who flew these aircraft during the war. On the day that I visited, I was lucky enough to witness the engine run-up and testing of the liquid-cooled Rolls-Royce V12 piston Merlins on the Avro Lancaster of the Dam Busters fame. And I've got to say, the sound and the vibrations through the ground was immense. Well, the array of large and small military aircraft is very impressive. The primary purpose of my visit to Duxford was to visit the civilian aircraft, which are preserved by the British Airliner Collection and are kept on display there. You can get right up close to these aircraft, and there's a team of volunteers who open up the aircraft and provide guided tours. And these volunteers know their stuff and love telling their stories about their aircraft. Funding of the Airliner Collection does not come under the umbrella of the Imperial War Museum and is dependent upon voluntary contributions. Cash and card donations can be made on board the aircraft during your visit, and you can also make contributions online at britairliners.org. To help describe the costs involved, during a recent revamp of one of the War Museum hangars, the Dove, Comet and York were moved outside for permanent display. As part of their plan to try and keep the aircraft in tip-top condition, they have arranged for an aircraft valet company to polish the planes with a high-tech and very expensive ceramic polish. This polish is said to prevent UV rays and helps keep dirt off for 3 years before it needs a further polish. They are also having UV filters fitted to the cabin windows to try and prevent perspex windows from clouding over, and this should also help protect the interior fabrics. These preventative measures are very costly, which is why they need your help, but will hopefully prevent the need for regular repaints. They manage to repaint one aircraft per year, which can cost many thousands of pounds, especially if equipment like fixed scaffolding, etc., is required over and above the cost of the paints. With 10 aircraft outside, it would mean they'd only get repainted once every 10 years, and the paintwork will soon start to badly deteriorate. So please make a donation and help preserve these historic aircraft. First up, and still housed within the hangar, is the Handley Page Hermes, which was delivered to BOAC in 1950 as Golf Alpha Lima Delta Golf. Alongside the Hermes is the Concorde, Golf Alpha X-Ray Delta November. This pre-production Concorde, named Concorde 101, never flew commercially, but, as seen from the kit-out, was part of the proving team that was equipped with multiple sensors and an escape hatch. This Concorde was also the fastest Concorde ever, and reached a speed of Mach 2.23 at 63,700 feet during testing on the 26th of March 1974. This Concorde was also the first to be fitted with the droop nose and glass visor, which will become standard on subsequent models, and during its testing career, Concorde 101 flew a total of 574 hours 49 minutes on 273 flights, and in November 1974 set a record for the fastest transatlantic crossing by a commercial jet. Moving to the outdoor display, we come across this beautiful Danair Avro York, registered Golf Alpha November Tango Kilo. This Avro York is a veteran of the 1948-49 Berlin airlift and was later used for in-flight refueling trials before being preserved. Across the grass sits this preserved and airworthy 1943 Catalina, registered Golf Papa Bravo Yankee Alpha, which served with the Canadian Air Force, later became a firebomber, and is currently the only airworthy Catalina in the UK. Next up is the Royal Air Force's BA 146 Zulu Echo 701. This 146 was delivered in 1986 and was configured as a VIP transport, serving with the Royal Squadron transporting the royal family and government ministers. The aircraft was regularly flown by both Prince Philip and Prince Charles, and the Queen's seat was protected beneath with armour plating as a protection from any potential firearms attack during landing or takeoff, although it could not be protected from this riffraff. Across the way sits Golf Alpha Lima Fox uniform, which started life as a de Havilland DH-104 Dove before being later modified to Dove 6 specification with more powerful engines. Fox uniform spent her entire flying career from 1948 to 1972 with the UK CAA flying NAV-A calibration flights, and no doubt will be well remembered, if not quite fondly remembered, by the many controllers who will have encountered the flight calibration patterns. Golf Alpha Lima Zulu Oscar is the only surviving airspeed ambassador, which was one of the earliest British airliners to have cabin pressurization. This three-tailed aircraft was intended as a post-war replacement for the DC-3. BEA operated 20 of these aircraft, calling them the Elizabethan class in honour of the newly crowned Queen. But unfortunately, this model is probably best remembered when in 1958, BEA Flight 609, carrying the Man United team and staff, crashed on takeoff from Munich, killing 8 of United's Busby Babes and 15 other passengers. This ambassador on display here, after service with BEA, transferred to Danair and flew with that iconic airline until 1971. Next along is BEA Viscount Golf Alpha Lima Whiskey Foxtrot, which is the world's oldest surviving Viscount. Originally kitted out in a 2x2 configuration with just 40 first-class seats, Whiskey Foxtrot was delivered to BEA in February 1953, and after crew training became the second Viscount to fly a scheduled service in April of that year. Viscount Whiskey Foxtrot was sold by BEA in 1963, and between then and her retirement in 1972, she served with Channel Airways, Trade Air, British Eagle, and finally Cambrian. Nicknamed the Whispering Giant, it is only when you get alongside this Bristol Britannia aircraft that you realise how big and tall it actually is. Registered Golf Alpha Oscar Victor Tango, this Britannia was the last of 18 Series 312s delivered to BOAC, arriving in Heathrow on New Year's Day 1959, and she operated BOAC's long-range routes over 4.5 years. Victor Tango was sold to British Eagle in 1963 and was subsequently purchased by Monarch in 1969 and operated until March of 1975, having spent her last 9 months as a freighter under lease to Invicta Airlines. Moving into the jet age is BOAC's Comet 4 Golf Alpha Papa Delta Bravo, which was delivered in September 1958. A few weeks later, Delta Bravo was ferried across the Atlantic to New York's Idlewild Airport. On the 4th of October 1958, Delta Bravo, as a scheduled BOAC flight, left New York for London, thereby becoming the first jet to cross the ocean from west to east on a scheduled flight. At the same time, flying from London to New York, sister ship Golf Alpha Papa Delta Charlie was operating the first scheduled jet service westbound across the ocean. The eastbound flight, operated by Delta Bravo, set the record at the time for the fastest crossing, completing the flight in 6 hours and 12 minutes. In 1965, BOAC sold Delta Bravo and 4 other Comets to Malaysian Singapore Airlines, and in 1969 she was sold on to Dan Air, who would become the largest operator of the Comet in the world, owning 49 in total. Delta Bravo flew at Dan Air until November 1973, when she was retired and offered up for preservation, coming to Duxford over 50 years ago in 1974. Alongside the Comet, and also in BOAC colours, is VC10 Golf Alpha Sierra Golf Charlie. Golf Charlie is one of the super VC10s operated by BOAC and was delivered in 1965 for initial crew training at Shannon. The original design of the standard VC10, which incorporated a lot of BOAC's design and operational requirements for hot and high operations, resulted in seat mile costs which were higher than the main competitors. And so the Super VC10 was developed, which traded some of the hot and high performance against a higher passenger capacity. In the cockpit walk-around, we can see that she's laid out for a 4-person operation, with a captain, co-pilot, flight engineer and navigator. Available to the navigator in the cockpit roof is a periscope-type sextant for astronavigation. At the rear of the aircraft, there is another periscope, which has a tiltable lens and thereby makes it possible to view the entire tailplane, all 4 engines, and the trailing edge of the wings. The quietness of the VC10 and having the engines towards the tailplane resulted in BOAC having significantly higher load factors on the VC10 than on the same routes operated by the 707 fleet. From 1971 onwards, most of the transatlantic flights were operated by the Boeing 747, and the VC10s were assigned to less prestigious routes, and following on the formation of British Airways in 1972, Golf Charlie was repainted in full BA colours in 1974. Golf Charlie remained in service with British Airways until October 79, and for her final flight, flew to Duxford in April 1980 for preservation. Golf Alpha Victor Foxtrot Bravo is the Trident II in the BEA colour scheme alongside the VC10. The Trident will become the first 3-engined commercial jet aircraft. The Trident, in the 111 passenger design proposal, looked all set for national and international sales success, when BEA instructed de Havilland to downsize the aircraft. This downsizing resulted in other European and US airlines deciding against the new smaller Trident, and the following year, Boeing introduced the 727, which slotted nicely into the gap in the market left by the original larger capacity Trident design. In time, BEA backtracked on their previous instruction, calling for a larger Trident, which resulted in the Trident II, such as Fox Bravo, and later on the Trident III. Innovation on the Trident went well beyond the novel engine arrangement. The Trident boasted advanced avionics that made it the first airliner capable of fully automatic blind landing in reduced visibility. The first automatic landing on a scheduled passenger service was performed on the 10th of June 1965, and the first genuine blind landing happened on the 4th of November 1966. De Havilland were so confident in the accuracy of this blind landing that the nose wheel of the Trident was positioned off-centre so that it would not discomfort the passengers by running over the runway centreline lighting. Moving map displays had begun to appear in aircraft cockpits around this time, and the Trident advanced the onboard technology by using the more accurate Doppler system over the less reliable Decca system. This Trident, Foxtrot Bravo, was delivered to BEA in 1968 and was loaned out to Cyprus Airways in 1973. In 1974, Fox Bravo suffered gunfire damage at Nicosia Airport when Turkey invaded northern Cyprus and the aircraft remained abandoned on the airfield for a number of years, before BA dispatched some engineers to Nicosia to assess the damage. Fox Bravo was found to have sustained just some bullet holes along the fuselage. These bullet holes were repaired with patches, and the aircraft was ferried to Heathrow in 1977. Fox Bravo was restored to full BA service, operating on the intercity shuttle services until her last BA flight from London to Manchester on the 27th of March 1982. Fox Bravo was subsequently flown to Duxford for preservation in June of that year. Next along is BAC One-Eleven Golf Alpha Victor Mike uniform in the beautiful British Airways Lander livery. Mike uniform is one of the BAC One-Eleven 500 series aircraft and was delivered to BEA in March 1969. The rear-engine T-tailed 111, introduced into service in 1965, was a 5-abreast 80-seater aircraft in a 3-2 configuration and was designed specifically for short-haul routes and was intended as a replacement for the Viscount. The 500 version, like Mike uniform, stretched the fuselage by 13.5 feet and increased the wingspan by 5 feet. The extensive flight testing of the 111 provided a greater understanding of the stalling problems of T-tailed aircraft. The 111 also utilised a dual-channel hydraulic system to power the flight control surfaces, and this meant that if one hydraulic system failed, the other could still operate the controls. Additionally, the 111, in case there was a hydraulic failure, was equipped with a manual backup that could be operated by the crew for several flight control functions. In the electrical systems, the 111 used separate electrical generators, and bus bars ensured that a failure in one part of the electrical system would not result in a complete loss of electrical power. These innovations and a simplification of the cockpit layout meant that the 111 could operate with a 2-person crew as opposed to a 3-person crew of the Trident. The 111 on display at Duxford is registered Golf Alpha Victor Mike uniform and was delivered to BEA in 1969, was based at Birmingham and remained with BA throughout her 24-year career before retiring to Duxford in March 1993. The final aircraft along this row is Britten-Norman Trilander Golf Bravo Echo Victor Tango, which was the last of the 73 Trilanders built on the Isle of Wight. She first flew in 1977, but a lack of orders at the time meant that she wasn't delivered until July 1983, when she joined the fleet at Aurigny Air Services in Guernsey. The Trilander was a larger development of the hugely successful BN2 Islander, with exceptional short-field performance, good economics, and a minimum of complex systems. The Trilander increased capacity to 18 passengers by stretching the fuselage, elongating the nose cone to provide more luggage space, and fitting a third piston engine on the tail fin. There is no aisle between the seats, and access to each row is accomplished by using one of the 5 doors along each side of the fuselage. The Trilander was not as successful as the Islander, and only 73 were built. However, the Islander family has been in continuous production for over 50 years, and over 1,250 aircraft have been delivered, making the family the UK's most successful airliner. Victor Tango was one of 15 Trilanders operated by Aurigny, and she remained part of the Aurigny fleet throughout her 34-year career, operating mainly on services between Guernsey, Alderney, Jersey and Southampton. When Victor Tango retired to Duxford in June 2017, she had accumulated 86,603 flights with a total of 28,280 hours, giving an average time per flight of 19 minutes 36 seconds. And that was it. I loved the day and a half that I got to spend in Duxford. I was surprised at how engaged I was with the military aircraft, and I was more impressed than expected at being able to get right up close to the civilian aircraft, in which I have a greater interest. And to finish up, I just had to take one more walk back down along Nostalgia Avenue. I'd highly recommend Duxford to anyone who has even the slightest interest in aviation, and having visited there would encourage people to make a donation to the British Airliner Collection, as I believe these civilian aircraft also deserve their place in aviation history to be preserved. Thanks for watching this episode, and once again, if you have enjoyed the show, please remember you can help out the Irish Skies channel by liking, subscribing and sharing the link to each episode, and you can also help defray costs through Buy Me a Coffee link in the description text.